So on this one, we're going to talk a little bit more about the wound management of major trauma. So we talk about major trauma as more like the big one, mostly on the chest, because we talk in the past videos, not so much self-reliance videos, but more in my early days of YouTube, and you can see them. They're still on the website about fractures and how to improvise some stuff that we have all around and everything. But this time we're going to talk about dressings, and mostly about burns. And because burn has their own entity and their own, it's almost like a monster on its own. And actually, in some hospitals, they have like burn centers, and burn centers are specialized in burns treatments, and even they have like burns ICU. So it's really like it requires a lot of different cares and specialized cares. A little bit like CCUs or cardiac units and stuff. Before we start on the burns, just want to quickly go through one on the abdomen that you may encounter. And we talk a little bit in the dressing part how to control bleeding, which is very important. And we were talking about the use of products like hemostatic agents, so Celiox, Quick Clot, things like that. But it's not so much about how to use it, but how to use it properly. So stop it. And the use of the tourniquet also will come in part of the trauma. The tourniquet that I like personally is that the SWAT T1. I didn't have to use it yet, and this is the kind of thing it's good to have. Hope that you'll never have to use it. But the reason I like this one versus all the others, all their tourniquet outside, is that it has multi-use and it's a little bit more compact. A lot of them have multi-use, so you can use that for wrapping. You can use that for so on the package itself they say you can use it for pressure dressing, elastic wrap, tourniquet. And it's all a question of how you use it with, so if you see the back over here, so if you see over here how does the shape of the, looks like more like this, that becomes a big, like a O. And this shape will tell us how much pressure you're putting on the. So I think it's very, very interesting. I got to experiment a little bit outside. I was waiting for the winter to come to see how well it does in the snow. Because it's not so much a Velcro, but there's some stuff that Velcro doesn't do very well on it. This is more like a rubbery stuff. So I don't know if on the water, so snow and things like that, or in the cold, if it's going to be affecting the efficiency of the tourniquet. So I'm waiting for it to be very cold outside, leaving outside, and then try to wrap it around me with my big bulky clothes and stuff and see if it still works. Another one that I want to talk about is the abdomen, and we're going to talk about one with dressing and what we call evisceration, meaning that basically the stomach, your stomach is pretty much open and all your viscers, so all your intestines and everything are just dropping outside. So it can happen if, for example, you got a big laceration, a big gunshot wound. Obviously, they would be more exploded, but basically your abdomen is open. So what happened with those is that you can lose a lot of heat, obviously, because this part is basically where we keep a lot of our heat, and that's the core. So that's where we want to protect at all time when we want to try to keep the heat on our body. And because you're losing a lot of heat, that means that they can cool off, and cooling off, only cooling off your body, which can create some hypothermia, but as well as that they can damage tissue that you need for your digestions, and where you'll need surgical. In a situation where we were in the self-reliance, those can be tricky. Can maybe salvage it for the beginning, and we talk about it in the first video, a few videos. first aid will never affect your self-reliance, but you may after decide, okay, I'm going to do a quick dressing, do this, reassess the situation. And some of those wounds that maybe will become palliative care, because it's like there's no way I can close that. And if you cannot close that, that infection will get in there, sepsis will get that, pretty much sure, or even going to have necrotic bowels. And if you start having in those situations, unless you have like a surgeon at hand or other, or you're able to bring them to hospitals or facilities that have whatever hospitals, then this person is relatively dead. So should we spend the all the resource for those? Then it becomes that question that we were putting initially, and this becomes like the ethics and the palliative care, and we won't get back. We did a video on that, but basically this again. So what can you do at the beginning is basically when I talk about a lot of the stuff I like to talk about is about principles. And why do I talk about principles? Is because if I tell you do this, if you miss, so for example, if I say as a dressing, use dressing A, dressing B, and cover with dressing C. Well, if you're missing dressing B, what do you do now? So people would be like, I don't know, like I was taught A, B, and C. Well, I don't have B, so what do I do? So what I'm trying to do is teach principles so that you know what you have to do, and then you can look around you and then improvise with, okay, what do I have that could play that function? So obviously I submit some ideas, but hopefully is that so that your brain can go and process other ideas so you can use it. So the ideas that you need to do is you're trying to keep this warm, and also you're trying to keep this moist, not wet, moist. Again, like dressing, not too wet, not too dry, right in the middle. And in this part, it is very crucial that it is right in the middle. Because if it's too wet, you can have maceration, and especially if we're in this long-term reliance situation, then if you get an infection in there, it's game over pretty much, because the antibiotics that you would need most likely would need to be IVs, and they're very strong stuff that you wouldn't have, because we have dirty intestine, like because we have like bacteria, we have E. coli and that stuff, we have everything. So if you're during an overgrowth, wound of the stomach, it can be nasty infections. So you don't want it too wet. You don't want it dry either, because if the tissue dry, they're gonna die. If they die, they're gonna necrose, and now you have necrosis of your stomach. And again, if you don't have a surgical team or surgical capacities any place around, it's game over again. So you want to keep it as moist as you can. If you keep it also too cold, so if you go to too wet, just like when you put water, like when you have a wet shirt on you or something like this, is that the temperature, the ambient temperature will cool off your central core, and then you'll go into hypothermia, which is not good either. So you need to keep it warm in a certain way. So you don't want to put too much water, but you want to keep just enough. So it's really a finicky game of this. And then after that, the best thing is to put like a plastic dressing, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I'm going to talk about when I'm talking about burns. You can reuse that dressing as well, because basically that's its function. So basically you want it warm, wet, moist, I should say, not wet, moist, and well covered, so that you don't lose too much fluids and stuff. You don't want to put too much pressure either, because too much pressure can compromise either your breathing, or also you could squeeze a intestine that you have, and then again necrosis. But you don't want also to let it too loose, because you also need that pressure. So when your stomach is closed, it does create a certain pressure in your stomach. So if, for example, your pressure in your stomach kind of goes down there, you can change that pressure, and you can impede your breathing as well. And also having all this guts coming out, if they could be more difficult to do wound closure if we're going that way. So let's talk about the main topics, which is burns. So to talk about burns is that we're talking about major burn. We're not just the little fingers, but major burns. So the first thing I want to show you is the survival of burns. Again, because they are so like I was talking about, they require so much care. They require a lot of resource. And the problem with the resource of burns will be your fluids, because they require a lot of fluids, because they lose a lot of fluids. They're going to require room. So when I used to work in an intensive care that was taking care of burn patient, the body temperature of the patient, so the body temperature of the person, not the room, had to be 38.5 degrees Celsius about. That means that the temperature of the air, literally, I've never been really in the jungle, but that's how it felt. Like, it was humid, very warm, and we were sweating every time we were doing dressings and everything. But that's the room temperature that you need to create, because don't forget that the skin is your thermostat. So that's how you keep your temperature in and out, by vascularization, that by dilation or contraction of your vessels and everything. Well, if you lose a big chunk of it, so like if you lose 20%, 40% of your body that can auto-regulate, you're losing your temperature regulation. So that means that your body can have, so it's more susceptible to whatever ambience you have. As well as you're losing a lot of fluids, because again, skin keeps the fluids inside, so you're losing a lot of fluids that you need to replenish, and if you replenish too much, it goes on extravascular, and then because it goes extravascular, because there's not enough stuff to retain it, now it can compress, and now you can have like Michelin Man, and Michelin Man can compress, which can create necrosis. So it is not an easy task to manage somebody with major burns. So you need to understand that right from the get-go. Those are the patients that you'll be mostly having to take the decision. Am I going to let this person on am I going to put this patient on palliative care, or am I going to take care of those patients? Because even in a facility, high tech, with everybody well trained, everything, they are hard to take care of. Trust me, they are a lot of, like, we're talking about months in the ICU, and then 2 months maybe of rehabilitation.